Welcome to Body by Design. I'm your host, Blue Driver, a women's strength training and metabolism coach. I went from years suffering hormone imbalances, looking soft and bloated, to symptom-free and building muscle for a toned athletic physique. Since then, I've made it my mission to empower women to take control of their own health, hormones and body composition. So grab a cup of coffee and let's build your body by design. Hello, and welcome to the Body by Design podcast. Thank you for joining me again this week. And this one, I want to go through the relationship between carbs and the scale and your weight and when you do deficits and how they feel in your body. So I am getting a lot of women coming to me telling me that when they eat carbohydrates, the scale goes up, they feel really inflamed and puffy in their body. In fact, I've just had a client come on board and we've had this conversation this week on her onboarding call where she was really concerned about increasing carbs because she gets this really puffy, inflamed feel and look, that fluffy look that she doesn't like. So I thought it'd be a really great opportunity to dive into the physiology and the science behind this, but without getting too technical, and just put it to you so you can understand what's actually going on in your body. I find most of the women that are attracted to my page and that come and work with me, really highly intelligent women. And I do find that when I give instead of just hey, do this and trust me, that when I give them the information behind it, they feel a lot better about it and able to move through the process, even when it feels quite emotional and a little bit alien to them, because they've got some information that makes sense behind it. And I think that's the most important part. And especially for me, I'm the sort of person that if I understand the whys behind something and it makes sense, that I tend to follow through a lot better and that the emotional dysregulation is a lot less. So I think there's two things that I see. Women talking about carbohydrates causing a lot of inflammation and a real puffy feel in their body. So they believe that carbohydrates aren't good for them. And then the second one is that they diet, they lose weight really fast, but then the minute that they start eating back at maintenance calories and bring those carbs back in, because obviously when you're in a deficit, the carbs are low, or if they've eaten really low carb for a very long time, and then they go and add those carbs, the scale instantly goes up and they go, see, carbs make me put on fat. Carbs make me gain weight. Let's get into now there's a few reasons why muscle is great for you, and one of them is behind carbohydrates and glycogen. So this is a little bit of the physiology side, just so you can understand what's going on in your body. So when we eat carbohydrates, they're turned into glycogen because glycogen is the preferred fuel source of our body. It's much easier to burn. So we take in carbohydrates, they are a source of energy, and we might be running around, going to the gym, doing whatever it is that we do during the day. We're quite active and we're burning off the carbohydrate of a meal. After it's taken its instant energy access, the next thing to happen is it goes, there's some surplus here, and my reserve stores, because your body, remember, is survive. Okay, so if it's not given optimal conditions to thrive, it will go into what do I need to survive and prepare for a time when I might need to survive, whether it's run from the lion, which is a lot of cortisol issues, or whether it's famine, which can be cortisol issues and fueling issues. So once we've burned off the immediate need, like the immediate energy needs are met, there's still more glycogen in your body from those carbohydrates. So your body then takes them with water, and it is 3 or 4 grams of water per gram of glycogen. And it mixes it up with water and it shuffles it into our muscles. Now, this is where we go. Muscle is really great for us because it's like a little storage suitcase or a little storage locker to put energy reserves. It goes into our muscles. And then after our muscle capacity is filled, so just keep in mind, the larger the muscle, the larger the storage space you've got, so the more glycogen you can put away. And then from there, what is left over in our bloodstream, our insulin kicks in, knocks on the door of the cell and says, please open up, I've got some glycogen to shuffle in. So it takes the glucose out of your blood and shuffles it into muscles. My camera keeps darting around. And it shuffles it into your cells, your body's cells. So obviously, the larger your muscle or the larger your storage capacity, the less your insulin has to work. So yes, insulin will rise after a meal and your blood glucose will spike after a meal. That is very normal, but it's how much energy you're burning. So getting up and walking after a meal is really, really good for you because it helps use up some of those carbohydrates in energy. And then obviously, if you're a really fit, healthy, strong person, you've got lots of storage in your muscles, so it puts the rest in there because when we move and we contract our muscles, we use glycogen in that process, so it's forever trying to shuffle back into those storages. And then the insulin happens. And if we don't have enough muscle, insulin has to be produced even higher and we get a resistance to it. It's kind of like when you've got your own kids that are yelling and screaming all the time, you tend to just tune out because you hear it all the time. Well, insulin knocks on the door of the cell, and if it has to keep knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking because it's got more and more and more glucose to shuffle into the cell kind of just goes, yeah, okay, whatever, like we do with our own kids, and it ignores the insulin, for want of a better way of expressing it. So now that we understand what's happening is that our muscles take up the glycogen that is mixed with water. So the glucose mixed with water becomes glycogen. We put it into our muscles. It's there for storage in case of famine, is pretty much what it is. Also, the more glycogen you've got stored into the muscle, the more fuel and power you've got in your training, which is a bonus, obviously. Now, when we move to dieting or chronic underfueling or people removing carbs from their diet, so there's kind of two scenarios here. Someone who is a long-term carb cutter, for want of a better expression. So you've been cutting carbs for a very long time because you thought that they were bad for you. Someone said they're not bad, so you started eating them and you ate lots of carbs and all of a sudden you feel really puffy and watery and you're like, see, it's inflammation. What is actually happening there is you've been so low carb for so long that your body has been in survival mode. Now, that also means that you'll get a cortisol spike as well. And when that becomes chronic, that also leads to insulin issues and the overwhelm, the hormone issues. So women, 40 plus women in perimenopause have usually got a lot of this going on if they've been cutting carbs. But you hear that carbs is good for you, so you instantly eat all these carbs and your body just goes, my God, finally, fuel. So one, it wants to take it up. Obviously, you're going to burn some energy off, but then it's got this fuel sitting there that it wants to madly store away because it hasn't had enough for your muscles and it hasn't had enough to have a safety mechanism for in case there's famine. And you've been in famine and it goes, oh my God, we've been in famine, it might happen again. So it takes all of the glucose with the water, turning it into glycogen, and it shuffles it away into your muscles. And you can get what you call, in bodybuilding terms, they call it an overspill. So your body is holding on to all this water to create glycogen in your body because it is being chronically deprived from you cutting carbs constantly from your diet. So it kind of overdoes it. And that leads to you physically looking inflamed and puffy. And what also happens with water retention, the scale goes up. And that's all it is. Now, if you have been a chronic carb cutter for some time, ideally you want to slowly bring the carbs back. You can't just go and eat a mass amount of carbs one day when you haven't eaten carbs in years and expect it all to be all right, because it's going to be a shock to your system. So ideally, over a little bit of time, you actually just want to be increasing your carbs, and that will avoid that excess glycogen feel. The other thing as well is if you've been cutting carbs for a really long time and then you start eating carbs, but you eat it over and above your maintenance calories, that is going to put weight on. With time, that will actually put weight on. But let's just assume when I'm talking here that when you re-eat and refuel, you're refueling to your maintenance calories. But because you have been cutting carbs for so long, you haven't had that glycogen stored in your muscles or your body. So it hasn't had that scale weight, and it's water holding the glucose inside your muscles. In bodybuilding, they actually use this science around the way they create a stage body. So if you think about bodybuilding and people going to shows, you know that they diet for a long time and they get their body fat super, super, super low. And they actually look really scrawny and scraggly, and it's not a nice look. And then a couple of days out before they go on stage, they do what they call carb loading. So now they reintroduce all these carbs, they have plenty of water, and the uptake gets put into their muscles. So what happens? They haven't put, yes, the scale goes up. Of course, the scale goes up. But what has actually happened is just the water volume has gone into the muscles. The competitor hasn't actually had a body fat increase. So their muscles go, because that scale weight, not only that water that's gone into the muscles has scale weight, but it also has physical volume to it. And when it's pushed into the muscles, it fills the muscles out. So they then go pop. So when they're on stage, their muscles are really popping out. And that's all they're doing. So essentially, you are doing the same. If you have a slightly higher body fat percentage, though, you might not see that pop of the muscles, though, depending on your, just remember that a bodybuilder gets really, really low in their body fat, so it's super easy to see that glycogen uptake and the pop. The other one where I see it create, so that's where someone gets emotionally attached to that scale. They'll see the scale weight go up, and then they just see their body get a little bit like that fluff that you're talking about is just your muscles pushing out over the body fat, and it feels uncomfortable, and your body might be holding a bit of excess water because your body's not used to processing it really well, and you need time for your body to settle into that. All right, so increasing your carbs at a slightly slower rate and just giving your body some grace and time to process is usually the best thing to do. And I guarantee you that fluff and inflamed feeling will settle down. The scale will pop initially, and then after a week or two, it will actually flatten out. About a week, usually. That first week is usually the glycogen uptake. Now, the other place that I see it, and this is something that I'm always coaching my women through in my container, is when we go into a deficit, before they come out of the deficit, I have the glycogen conversation with them, okay? Because one, they're feeling depleted, they've been on a diet, they're feeling run down, they're tired. It's been, a long road. They've been super committed. It's usually like a 16 for a general deficit. We do 12 to 16 weeks. So it feels like it's been a really long time on less food. They're hungry, they're tired. Then they eat this food that I've gone, here, eat maintenance calories again. Here's your new maintenance, go for it. They eat, and then they step on the scale and go, oh my God, all my hard work undone. See, my body doesn't like carbs, because a lot of the deficit is reducing carbs and fats out of the diet and keeping the protein. So they instantly link it to, oh my God, I've eaten carbs, so now I'm gaining weight. Well, yes, there is weight gained, but there is not body fat gain. One, body fat just doesn't create overnight like that. It just doesn't. When you have massive jumps on the scale overnight, like half a kilo, things like that, that's through other causes, not through body fat. And one of the ones can be this glycogen uptake. So they've been in a diet. In that first week or two of diet, usually the first week of dieting, what happens is like the scale starts moving really fast. So that's another thing. Someone sees a scale move really fast in that first week and goes, see, it's carbs. I've cut the carbs and it's just dumping off me. But it does tend to slow down, because the very first week is usually your body is now in a deficit. It's burning more energy than you're actually providing for it. So now it's going, I'll take my glycogen stores. There's famine that your body physiology is telling you. So that's what it's got its stores for. So in that first week, it starts pulling the glycogen out of your muscles to give you more energy, because you're actually eating less energy than you're expending, which is the idea of a deficit. So in that first week, the scale for some women can actually move really quite fast. So yes, you start fat burning, because fat burning and glycogen burning can happen at the same time, but most of that coming down is the glycogen to begin with. That's why sometimes when we first start, that big scale movement in the first week is because there is glycogen coming out of the muscles. But the same happens on the other end. So they're really excited about that. They link that in their mind to carbs. See, I've dropped carbs, the weight's coming down, and they're thinking weight. They're not thinking body fat, which is one of the key things I do in my coaching is we actually track skeletal muscle mass and body fat. So we can literally see that this is not your body fat that is coming on. And it's so helpful for women to have a visual of what their body is doing. So they see that come down and then they go and eat more calories and then they see it go up. And because in the beginning it went really fast, they link that to, oh, it's carbohydrates that made the weight loss, but they're not thinking about body fat. So when the weight comes back on, because what you've been in famine, you've added more carbohydrates and now your body's going, woohoo, carbohydrates, I better put some in stores for later in case there's another famine. It pulls in the water, it pulls in the glucose, turns it into glycogen, shuffles it into your muscles, and the scale goes up and the woman spirals. You know it. You know you do. Every time you eat carbohydrates, you go, oh my God, look at the scale. And it's literally glycogen. Unless you're doing excess calories over a long period of time, where it's excess to your maintenance, so you're in a surplus, that's when it turns into body fat. Can we be more efficient at burning body fat? Can we have more energy, better sleep, and all these sorts of things that carbohydrates provide for us? Not to mention the vitamins and minerals that come from the types of foods that actually, if you're eating nutrient dense and rich carbohydrates, all the nutrients that it gives, so your body just functions optimally, that, it takes actually just a general surplus in energy to create body fat on your body and for longer than a week. Okay, so you've got to be doing that over a sustained period of time for it to be body fat. But when you come out of a diet, it is simply a bounce off the bottom. So if you have an attachment to a number, I don't recommend, I really don't. And yes, your weight is relevant in particular scenarios. It's not dismissed altogether. But if you are someone that has a weight in their head where you think you might feel ideal, sorry, my phone is going off. I can hear that. I'm going to put that on silent, which I did not do before I jumped on this podcast. I'm so sorry. Okay, it's off now. And now I totally lost where I was. So, you get to the end of a diet and you've got this ideal weight in your mind. If you are majorly attached to that and then you see the scale go up, then it becomes problematic for you. But understanding why the scale has gone up, at the end of the day, it is just a reference tool and another tool and guide used within other tools to create body composition. You need to switch your mind from weight and the scale to body composition, which is body fat and muscle mass. And really at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter what the scale says, because you're not walking around with a big label on your head that says 65 kilos or whatever your number is. You're not walking around with that number on your head. Okay. Nobody can see it, but they can see when you've got a jack sculpted body, can't they? They can see when you look healthy and vibrant, can't they? And it's all about body composition, which is your muscle mass and your body fat. And that scale will bounce at the end of a deficit. But again, with the methods that I use, and we're tracking body fat and skeletal muscle mass, we can see what happens. You can literally see the muscle mass going back up again because the mass of the muscle is getting bigger with the filling of the glycogen. So it's actually not even true muscle mass gains there. It is the muscle mass going up though, because your muscle has gained more mass with the glycogen being restored. Okay. And the body fat will stay the same. And in fact, in a lot of cases in the first week or two, I see body fat get even lower when women go back to eating maintenance calories. It can still drop after you go back to eating maintenance calories while the scale's going up. So if you get attached to that scale without actually understanding your own physiology and the science behind why it's happening, then there is this emotional spiral. And then we link it back again to, oh, well, if I cut carbs and the scale moves really fast, and then I add carbs and the scale goes up really fast, carbs must make me fat. And it's just not the case. Our physiology is not built like that. Remember, we are quite we're human beings that go back a really, really long time, and our survival mechanisms are still built into us. This is why eating like grandma used to eat is the best way to eat, butter and grass-fed meats and dairy and fruits and honey, all those sorts of things that are so nourishing for our body, but they also provide the glycogen in a great way with nutrients, vitamins, minerals in our body as well. And so many people link the carbs to being fat or gaining weight or whatever it is that you want to look at without understanding that in body composition, the weight is not what we should be looking at. So just remember that next time you step on the scale after trying to restrict in whatever way. If you are a yo-yo dieter, this is what is happening. You diet, it comes down, you start eating again, it bounces up, and you go, I just can't eat that many calories. And it's all around the glycogen. It is just around the number on the scale because of the amount of water it needs to place the glycogen into your muscles to keep you safe. This is literally what your body is trying to do to keep you safe from famine. It feels you're in a famine when you restrict, and it doesn't matter whether you've gone into a very intentional deficit, which I do with my women, because most women, yeah, okay, even if you're that skinny fat, your issue is you don't have enough goddamn muscle. There's not a woman that comes into my program looking to improve the way she looks without me having to go, you need more muscle. That is always the priority. But yes, most need to lose some body fat too. Now, some of the tools we can use is a deficit for that. Obviously, we go through optimization phases and priming phases before to make sure your sleep, your digestion, your energy, you can train hard, all those sorts of things are in line first. You've got good body temperatures, so you're nice and warm. Your metabolism is firing. So we do all of that first. But then sometimes for some women, a deficit is appropriate. Some women, recomp is enough. Having them just under maintenance, driving the muscle mass forces the body fat down anyway. But some women, we do need an intentional deficit. Dieting is not a bad thing. I feel like dieting out there is getting a really, really bad rap at the moment. And yes, most women do need to lose some body fat, but you don't have to necessarily diet to do that. Your biggest issue is you are under muscled. And while you're attaching your worth and what you're doing to this scale, whilst not understanding the physiology of your body and what's happening, you're just throwing yourself into an emotional spiral. So this is what we do with women when we go into these really strategic deficits that are needed and they're healthy and ready to be resilient, and they're resilient enough and ready to go into a deficit. We go into the deficit, but we have those conversations around what glycogen is doing, and I support them on the way out. I don't take any women into my coaching program if they're not willing to stay for a couple of months after the dieting for a reason, because so many women go, great, I want to come in, I want to do a 12, 16 week diet. That's all I want to work with you for. And then I'm out of here. Diet's done. I'm out of here this week. Yeah. And then they step on the scale and go, oh my God, the scale's going up. What's happening? So I keep women in after the diet as well for the psychological support around what can happen, as well as they get to keep seeing the data and they literally can see body fat going down still and muscle mass going back up when the carbohydrates go back into their body. So irrelevant of the scale going up, they can see that their body composition continues to improve. If anyone's actually even wondering about the glycogen bounce and how it can really make your muscles pop, DM me on Instagram this podcast and I will send you photos of a client of mine, Kirsten. She was just amazing in the literal. So she actually trained really hard. She was one of those skinny fat people. We did lots of building with her, and then she wanted just to reveal what she had been building. So we did a strategic deficit. Her body fat was quite low and she was super worried about it. She had the opposite thing. She was like, oh my God, I'm getting too skinny. I look really terrible. So we had to have a conversation around glycogen, that she's like, I'm losing all my muscle. I don't have a bum and I don't have shoulders anymore. And we had to have the conversation in the reverse for her, which was you need to remember when you first started dieting, the small amount of fat that she did have was covering the muscle. We're now going to reveal that. But in that process of doing a deficit, glycogen has been depleted from your muscles. Your muscles are going to look flat because they don't have volume in them. I said, but I promise you, give it 2 weeks post-diet and you will feel amazing. So she finished her diet and then she sent me photos of her because she was going away on a holiday, and she sent me these amazing photos. She's in Bali in a beautiful setting, and she sends me these photos, and literally day and night, all of a sudden this woman had muscles popping everywhere and she just looked so jacked and amazing. Because why? She put the glycogen back into her muscles. And that was it. Scale went up 1.5 kilos. And she felt amazing. And she went, oh my God, I do have muscles. It was so good to see. That's a third scenario, actually, that I didn't really think about before I jumped on this podcast. But anyway, that is a third scenario in which glycogen works with the psychology. So we have the first one where you're a chronic dieter and quick uptakes can make your body kind of overperform and you can feel really fluffy and inflamed with it, as well as the scale going up. Then we've got the dieting psychology that even if it's a very planned strategic diet, we link that weight on the scale to carbohydrates. And when we come back to maintenance, you're not expecting that bounce and it makes you spiral and it makes you want to cut your food again, and then you just get metabolically damaged. And then the third one would be if you're one of those people that are trying to lower the body fat and reveal the muscle, you might be dieting and going, but I just look scrawny. You need to get to the other end because your glycogen has been depleted and your muscles aren't popping. Okay, so you need more time post-diet to allow that refueling to happen. And, you know, it plays a really big part in psychology and our physiology. And it just goes back to pretty much caveman days and the way our body was built for survival. Because back in those days, you would go through times of famine, not through choice and not through modern, you know, we go through because we think carbs are bad, because we think we're fat, because we think we need to lose weight. But back in the day, it used to be, well, food was just scarce. So our bodies have these mechanisms built in for survival. And that's what glycogen does. It helps you survive. But this is how we can apply it to modern day and why you're having these spirals around carbohydrates and the scale. So keep this in mind next time you try to do a deficit, or if you're trying to bring carbs back into your diet. Keep this in mind each time you step on that scale, that there is a glycogen bounce. And if you're really unsure about the scale and you're struggling with each time it goes up and down, I highly recommend tracking more than just scale weight when you're trying to change your body composition. Muscle weighs more than you think, glycogen plays a role, and body fat needs to be reduced, not overall weight. Overall weight reduction means that you're reducing everything, including muscle mass, ligament strength, bone density. If you don't do these processes right, they're all very interlinked. Training, nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, they are all so woven into one another that if one of them isn't great or you don't understand how it fits in, then you're never going to change your body composition. All right, so this is just one piece of the puzzle here, which is glycogen. So I highly recommend, if the scale is sending you into that emotional spiral, get more information. Use data to show you what your body's doing, because essentially you're stepping on a scale and you've got no idea of what's going on internally. And tracking the data, your measurements, yes, scale weight, your height, all these different measurements that we take, and it gives you muscle mass and body fat. I literally created my own tool in my training that has the best. There's so many calculations out there that I have tested across hundreds of women, the best formulations and calculators to get it as close as possible. And you're able to use that tool to literally track and see what's going on in your body. And if it's headed the wrong way, your body composition, you get to act early and change something to make it head in the right direction. And that's the beauty of it. But next time you step on that scale after doing a deficit and you see that initial bounce, please don't panic and think of this podcast. If you've gotten any great nuggets out of this, I would love for you to share it on Instagram and tag me at strengthtraining.nutritionist and spread the word of this podcast so more women can get this information into their hands. And I'll catch you next week.